So I actually, and just to let you know, I don't know if Rose mentioned the meeting is being recorded. I just want to mention that again, making sure we're all aware of that. So Dr. Aldrin, Dr. Andrew Aldrin is joining us tonight. He's the program chair and actually the founding program chair of the Master of Space Operations at Embry-Riddle Aeronautical University Worldwide. I had the privilege of working with him back when I worked for the College of Aviation. He was phenomenal, came in the gate swinging, and has been just doing some amazing things. He previously was the founder and director of the ISU Center for Space Entrepreneurship at Florida Tech and an associate professor of engineering management at Florida Tech. So before he moved into academia. Dr. Aldrin, he's a distinguished career in industry and government research, including executive positions at Boeing, United Launch Alliance, and Moon Express as well. He is the CEO and president of the Aldrin Family Foundation, which is a charitable 501c3 organization, and it's dedicated to harnessing the inspiration of space to ignite a passion for STEAM education in students of all ages and backgrounds. So it's really, really some cool things they're doing there. He was also a member of the research staff at the RAND Corporation, the Institute of Defense Analysis. He serves on the board of several charitable organizations as well. I don't know how he has the time, including the Secure World Foundation, Sea Space Symposium, and the Tau Zero Foundation. He holds a PhD from UCLA in political science, an MBA from Trium, NYU LSE HEC, not sure on that one. It's a mouthful. And an MA from George Washington University in Science, Technology, and Public Policy. So without further ado, let me introduce to you Dr. Andrew Aldrin.
Thank you very much, Amy. Oh, hang on, I need to get back to this. Yes. So, first things first. Oh, this works better. Got it. Okay, thank you very much, Amy. It's really a pleasure to be here. And I appreciate you hunting me down and encouraging me to get involved. You know, one of the things I really love about putting together these kind of talks is it makes me think about important things. And in some ways, I've been so busy developing the programs, focusing on educational content. We're actually working on putting out a new program next year, we hope. Getting back to what's really important, and what's really important is all of you and getting jobs. And so it kind of forced me to sit back and think about, okay, where do we really sit in the space industry? And I'm going to start talking about a lot of, oh, hang on, I need to go to presenting position, excuse me. All right. So we're going to talk about, maybe we want to zoom out just a little bit more. Forgive me. Don't you know I'm a trained professional here, right? Okay, we know how to do this. All right, so I want to start by talking about some of the economics of space, because I think one of the things that's important is figuring out where you belong in the industry, because it's not all the same. Everything in space isn't SpaceX. By the way, working for Boeing was a great experience, and I encourage you all to talk with them. It's been a few years. I think I left Boeing proper in 2007, 2006, but then I was at ULA for a while, so I still kind of interacted with them. They have great internship programs. It's a great company to work with. There are lots of places you can move around, but if you get there, don't be afraid to move around. I mean, I think in terms of lateral career moves within Boeing, because everything is going on there. So I'm gonna talk about the space ecosystem and then where you fit in, and we'll kind of conclude talking about the actual thing you're interested in, which is getting jobs, and then we'll have some time at the end to do some Q&A. I got nothing else to do, so I'll hang out with you. Okay, so we're going to talk about satellites and rockets, because that's what we always talk about when we talk about space, right? But you want to know something? This is where the real action is. It's the users of the data, whether it's soldiers, farmers, manufacturers. What matters is what this stuff does for these people. And don't ever forget that, because it's the most important thing to know, because one of the things we're not going to talk about are flying saucers. And that has nothing to do with the sort of the congressional hearings and things like that are going on. One of the tenets of what we do is it's got to make sense. Because if it doesn't make sense, it isn't going to make dollars. And so anything we do in the MSO program is founded in real technical reality. It's founded in business reality. It's founded in political reality. It's got to be real for us to talk about. So there isn't a whole lot of flying saucers and how do we send 1 million people to Mars? No offense against Elon Musk. It's a great thing, but it's not going to affect any of your careers in the next 10 years. So find your place in space. So what's the story here? Okay, so space is cool. We know that. The interesting thing is, in a lot of ways, space is cool. Space now is cooler than it has ever been, but you got to be careful of the hype, because there's a lot of talk going out there that makes you think, all you got to do is put a shingle out there, put an X on it, and claim you got a rocket, and you're going to be a billionaire. And it's just not that way. It's hard. It's hard. But there are great opportunities. But now is the time to get into a cool industry, but you got to be smart. Go to look for places in the industry where there's lots of growth, where there's a solid underpinning, a solid market supporting it. Pay attention to this, because that's going to be the career area you want to get into. And we're going to talk about the different market segments. So one of the biggest dynamics in space is kind of the commercial transition. And people talk about it. The dinosaurs like Boeing and ULA are being replaced by small furry mammals. And so I've had an opportunity now to work with both. I worked with Boeing and ULA for a long time. I worked at a startup company, Moon Express, for a while. And then I ran a program in space entrepreneurship. So I kind of know something about dinosaurs and small furry mammals. And not all dinosaurs are big brontosauruses, right? There are a lot of Tyrannosaurus rexes out there. And that's not a bad thing. You just need to be aware of it. And not all furry mammals are beavers. There are rats out there. And one of my favorite statements is, small furry mammals speak with forked tongue. And it's true to an extent, because the Silicon Valley ethos, Amy, in fact, said it today when I was trying to set up my system. I said, I am a trained professional here. I actually know how to do this video presentation stuff. She said, well, fake it till you make it. And that is the attitude. And there's a lot of that in Silicon Valley. So if somebody says they're going to do, I'll give you a great example. Where is my phone? Where is my phone? I don't have my cell phone. Okay. There's a company out there that is promising to deliver broadband speeds over a cell phone, direct from a satellite to your cell phone. They're going to get you 5G speeds. Okay, with my cell phone, I could pull it out here if I could find it. Would show you that I actually checked it today on another call. I get about 500 megabits in my office outside of Denver. This is sort of suburbia, 500 megabits from a cell tower. To get that kind of speed, you would have to have a satellite that's probably a 5 to 10 ton satellite with 5 or so kilowatts of power. It would have to be massive, and you would have to have hundreds of them to get anything like even Starlink rates down to a phone, because the cell phone antenna is this tiny little thing. And just the technical realities of radio link margins tell you that this doesn't make sense. But they're out there getting millions of dollars of investment, and I scratch my head. And so pay attention to the markets that you're getting into. Don't just believe what every founder is telling you, that this thing is going to work and you're all going to be billionaires. And forget about salary. We'll just give you equity in the company. I mean, just pay attention to it. It's important. This is a good time to be smart. So from here, we're going to take a quick journey through the space ecosystem. A lot of this kind of draws on what we do in the MSO program. And so let's start with the notion. Why do we care about this stuff? Why do we care about the economic space? I just want to go build rockets. Well, rocket fuel is not kerosene, it's cash. With no cash, you have no rockets. And fundamentally, technology without a market is literally engineering solitaire. It doesn't make any sense. So it's important for you all to understand the economics of what's behind it. Understand the forest where you live. Don't just look at the trees. One of the things I like to talk about is you don't get to see the forest by climbing the tallest tree. You got to get out of the forest. And I think it's important for you all to understand that. Every program, let me back up just a little bit. When we built this program, one of the things that we did is we went out and talked to executives in industry and in government and found out what they were looking for in a graduate studies program that wasn't a pure engineering program. And they said, look, we need our leaders to understand the business. We need our leaders to understand the policy. We need our leaders to understand the dynamics of the industry, because one guy put it best. He used to run a program. He just recently retired over a Kennedy Space Program that provided system engineering, technical support. Had about 2,700 people. Almost all of them were engineers. And he said, look, I make a lot of decisions that aren't good engineering decisions. I make decisions for economic reasons, policy reasons, lots of different reasons. And I can't have, you guys know engineers. Engineers, it's clear. If that technically doesn't make sense, it's a stupid idea, it's a bad decision. And why is this guy running the company, right? They need to understand what he said. They need to understand why I'm making these decisions, because we've got to be on the same page. And so that's kind of what's important about understanding the system. And every program, I don't care if it's a NASA program on a cost plus contract, it has the finances are a tremendously important part of it. The broad policy and politics are important. And then finally, this is something that more intended more for some military people that I was briefing a couple of weeks ago. The health of the industrial base is very important. And actually, I do see one person in uniform. Look, we need to understand the economics, because the competition that we are in, and it's only going to heat up with our adversaries, is going to be more economic than it's going to be military. Okay, so let's step back and look at the space economy. And there are lots of different ways of looking at the space economy. In fact, I think I've got a chart in backup maybe that shows all the different estimates of the space economy, and that's because we're just measuring different things. They're not bad, but you have to be careful. These are numbers coming from Morgan Stanley, and we get to about $1 trillion space economy between now and 2040. Now, do I buy into all of these numbers completely? No, there's stuff here and there that I don't like. I actually think the Bureau of Economic Analysis at the Department of Commerce has better numbers, but unfortunately their numbers don't go beyond, they're all looking backward. And I wanted to give you a look forward. Here are the basic segments of the space economy. There's the in-space infrastructure, and that's what we talk about most. These are rockets, satellites, and that's mostly what it is. But this is this is the hardware. But it's not most of the space economy, right? It's about 1/3 of the space economy. This is ground systems, and we'll talk more about what's in the ground systems. And we're going to go through each of these segments in a little more detail. And then there's Earth observation, which is a fairly small segment, reasonably good growth. I like this segment a lot. I think it's super dynamic, a great place to be. And then there's telecom services. But all of this stuff up here isn't going into space. It's all on the ground. And so we're going to talk about that. All right, first segment we're going to look at is ground infrastructure. These are satellites. In fact, this is launch. Well, we'll get to that in just a second. These are all satellites. These are government programs. So this is foreign government programs. The biggest chunk of this is China. And I'll be honest with you, the numbers that we have on China they're rubbish. They are. They may be high, they may be low. This is the Space Foundation puts out numbers, and they basically take a percentage of the Chinese economy and then escalate it as the economy grows. It could be right, but the point is, there's a lot of growth here. 9.5%. Now, I'm not saying you guys should all run off to China and try and look for jobs there. It's a lousy place to work. I'm certain of that. But that's where a lot of the growth is. So let's look at the US hardware market. It's as big as the rest of the world. And growth is reasonably good. This is just satellites. Here's commercial satellites. It's not a huge segment. And actually the growth doesn't look like it's all that big. So this is, if you look in the overall space economy, this is not a bad place to be. And then you got launch, which is, everybody loves launch. Launch is a lousy business. It's a tough business. The economics of it aren't good. The return on investment isn't good. The margins aren't good. Contrary to popular opinion, the launch business has been a commercial business since 1989, with the exception of the big NASA programs. Since 1989, it's been a firm fixed price business. And that's tough when you're on a firm fixed price for a contract and your customer says, oh, sorry, I'm going to be a year late with my satellite. Well, now you got to go back to the customer and demand more money because you've got $100 million asset sitting on the ground for a year because his satellite's late. Now you end up getting compensated for it and things like that. It's a tough business to be in financially. It's not a great place. And so why are there 150 small launch companies? People like to watch rockets. It's not, it has to be, it's because they're not in it for the money, or they find out, which is why you're starting to see lots of them go bankrupt. One word of advice, don't go into the small launch industry. Or if you do, be planning for your next job because you may need it soon. Okay, let's go on to a big chunk of the industry. This is ground systems, going up to $200 billion. These are the Morgan Stanley numbers. And I looked at these numbers and I thought, something doesn't look right here. And so I started digging around and actually came up with different numbers. As it turns out, most of this stuff comes from cell phones. And so I looked at Statista, and they had, their market was like down at 2 billion. And Bryce Technology has the $100 billion number. And the geospatial industry market by technology has it at 260 billion. It's all over the place. So what's really going on here? What I looked for, this is Sherlock Aldrin, by the way. Take my courses, you'll see a lot of Sherlock Aldrin. What I did is just dig into the numbers. And I found out it's probably, none of these numbers are actually right. I just looked at the number of cell phones that are purchased every year. And cell phones are about 90% of this market. And they said the GPS chips in them sell for about 10 or 15 bucks retail. And so I just ran the numbers and came up with numbers that were a lot smaller. So pay attention to these numbers. The point of this whole thing is ground system is not a market to be in unless you want to be manufacturing GPS chips or something like that. So it's there. It's a big market, but it's not a great market to be in. I mean, it's not a place to look for a job. I'll tell you, unless you want to look at it, you want to go work for Broadcom or one of the chip fab manufacturers. Anyway, all right, let's go to Earth observation. I just pulled some charts from one of the classes I teach on geospatial, and in order for students to actually, what this is part of the exercise where we look at what's your total addressable market. And so in order to do this, what I want you to think about is don't think about what just the geospatial market is and look for numbers that talk about how much remote sensing money is going to be out there. Think about the bigger market. What do you use remote sensing data for besides selling it to NASA, which is kind of a small part of the whole thing? It's business information. And so could look at, one of the things to look at would be, understand the business consulting market, because the companies like Deloitte Touche are going to be big players, because they're the companies that sell business information to businesses. So this is a big market. It's north of $200 billion, and it's got combined growth of almost 4%, compound annual growth of 4%. Not a bad place to be, but it's nice to live in a forest where you have lots of nice trees, right? You've got growth, and this is not a bad place to live. Now let's look at data, because a big part of geospatial data looks like big data. And so big data firms are going to get involved in this. You know, there's an intersection of these two circles in a Venn diagram, and this is a big industry too. No surprise, $600 billion. AI is going to be a huge part of geospatial, because you've got all of this data coming in from different sources, and figuring out how to turn that data into real business information is going to require AI. I'm not a huge fan of thinking AI is going to change the world. This is a market where it's really going to matter, and I'll get into kind of where that fits. And then finally, let's look at there are numbers out there. These again are Morgan Stanley numbers, and since I don't really know what's behind them, I'm always kind of suspicious of these kinds of numbers. But this is the ecosystem for geospatial, and it looks good. There are really good, solid markets here. It's the other thing that's really important is for the kind of information you get in the geospatial industry, space is very unique, and it's a big part of it. Sure, you can get images from drones and other high altitude platforms, but you can't get them globally. You can't get them with the same kind of precision revisits. You can't get the kind of temporal resolution of having a constellation of satellites. So space is really unique in this market. It's a good place to be. This is one of these places where I think the fundamentals look really solid. The other thing that's kind of interesting about geospatial is this is an industry that is in transition. This is the model today. So you got a satellite, like Planet does satellites, and they sell their data. They actually process their data and sell it directly. It's a direct line. Airbus, Spire, collect the data, analyze it, sell it. It's a vertically integrated business. Now, for some industries that makes sense. I don't think it makes sense here. What is this guy running Spire, running SpaceX, there's not SpaceX, they're not in this business yet, or running Planet, know about what this farmer needs, what this financial market needs? They don't have any real connection with them. They're just trying to sell their information directly. It's not very efficient. And so where this industry is going, it's not yet, but this is what's going to happen, is you're going to get fragmentation. You're going to have satellites up here generating data and sending data down, and they'll do the processing of it, the primary processing. But then it's going to go out to a bunch of intermediary firms that are going to be probably using AI, and they're going to be taking data from a bunch of different satellites. Right now, there are over 40 different satellites generating different kinds of data from space, and they're going to be pulling this from all of them, because these guys don't care where the data comes from. These guys are locked into whatever data stream they've got. These guys are going to pull it from everywhere because their connection is going to be with the end users. And so you're going to have certain firms specializing and working in the finance industry or working in agriculture. You're going to see that the consulting companies like Deloitte, Booz Allen coming in. You're going to see the data analytic firms like Palantir coming in here. Agricultural firms like John Deere. John Deere's already in this business. This is where the money is going to be made. This is kind of where you want to be, because you got to know these people. You got to know what's happening up here to get the right data. But if I were going to say, what's a sweet spot in space right now, this is it. And I think that's where there's going to be a lot of growth, a lot of opportunity. And it's going to be mostly about knowing these guys and being able to put it together. Great place to be. So, and I'm not getting paid as a consultant for any of these companies. So anyway, let's go on to the other industry that's the biggest industry. Starlink is going to revolutionize everything because they're going to take over telecommunications completely and totally. I have smart people telling me this, that everyone will be using Starlink for everything. Okay, Starlink is doing really well to get you to maybe 100 megabytes, and they're running into capacity constraints already. Okay, if you live in an urban environment, you can get, certainly if you're a business, 10 to 20 gigabits. You can, if you've got 5G millimeter wave, which isn't really there yet, but in densely packed areas, you will get those speeds. You'll get multi-gigabit speeds over your phone. Fiber, dedicated lines to reduce the latency as much as possible. Starlink, Satcom in general, does not have a chance in this market. They don't really have a chance in this market. This is where I live. And I've got a gigabit coming into my house. Reliable as heck. It's perfect. I've got, like I said, 500 megabits on my phone. I can go 10 miles in one direction and probably have nothing. But in this sort of suburban area, it's going to be tough to compete. And even if they can for a period of time, it's just a question of time before 5G towers are everywhere where I live. And so this is going to be a tough market. I honestly think Starlink, not just, I'll pick on Starlink because everybody loves them. And it's fun. I have to admit, I enjoy this. It's going to be tough to be competitive. So what we're left with for Satcom, and this is all Satcom. And I actually think the case can be made that geosynchronous satellites have a really big chunk of it and are more efficient in a lot of ways than a constellation, but that's a whole lecture, at least in itself. Anyway, our rural, where I think Satcom plays an important role, where you can't get cable, where you can't get 5G or even 4G cellular. Satcom will do well. Now, a lot of this stuff, one of the problems with rural unserved areas is they're rural because nobody wants to live there. And in a lot of cases, these are rural areas that are in the third world. And there are a lot of people, so there are potential numbers out there, but the problem is they don't have any telecom or other services because they can't afford it. Their governments can't afford it. And so how are they going to pay for what's literally going to be a $50 to $100 billion satellite constellation? When you talk about satellite constellations with 10,000 satellites, you're talking about constellations that are going to cost tens of billions of dollars. And are these guys going to pay for it? I don't know. It's a tough one. And we're already seeing some of the numbers coming. Starlink is not hitting their financial numbers. Here is an interesting market that you are all probably somewhat familiar with, aviation and maritime. Now, the good news here is these guys will pay. They will pay for any kind of service. And so Starlink now, I think, charges, you guys probably know this better than I do, I think it's $1,000 a month for 1,000 to 20, I think 20,000 is the upper end for service to an aircraft. And that may be private aircrafts, 1,000, a commercial jet's 20,000. Those are markets, those are dollar amounts that actually help to support. It still doesn't end up being more than $1 billion or so if you total up all the planes out there and you charge on, I forget which number I used, maybe it was $5,000 a month. It's single digit billions. And so that doesn't get you probably where you need to be if you've got to pay down, you know, a 20, 10, 30, 20, 50, $100 billion constellation. So it's not this is a, forget about SATCOM, the telecom industry in general isn't a wonderful place to be. If you actually look at the revenue numbers in telecom in the United States, total revenue for telecom is dropping. If you look at the world, total revenue for telecom is flat at about $1.5 trillion, and space is 10%, always has been, and maybe it goes up to 12%, maybe 15%, but this doesn't really suggest that's in the cards. So SATCOM can't compete with fiber and 5G. We're limited to these to essentially unserved markets today. Places where it's too expensive for 5G to get out there. I think that 5G will ultimately accrete more into these areas, but probably in developed countries like the United States where they can afford it. And there's some of these customers are valuable overall in this market. It's a big market, right? $150 billion, but it's low growth. The good news actually in this market is the margins are fantastic. When you're selling data, not when you're building satellites. As I said, the building the satellite part of the market isn't great. What's going on here? Okay, now we're going to do something totally different. We're going to switch to the notion of commercialization, because that's the revolution. Surely this is the revolution. Well, it's not the first time. We've actually had what I call 3 waves of commercialization. The first one, and this again is a whole separate lecture, but I'm going to go through it in just a couple of charts because it's important for you to understand. First wave of commercialization was really kind of started by the space shuttle, and the space shuttle was going to launch for about $8 million was going to be the cost of a shuttle launch. And it was going to revolutionize space. We're going to be sending all kinds of space tugs out there. It was going to be great. With the Challenger accident, it never happened. The second wave was the first time we tried to do satellite constellations with Iridium Teledesic. We were going to darken the sky with satellites, which are relatively was 1,000 satellites. That was incredible. That's a small number today. What happened here was, you know, ultimately there were about with the number, I think there was probably $15 billion of constellations being proposed. Ultimately, we built about, actually it was almost 10 billion of constellations got built. And so Iridium, Globalstar, Orbcomm are literally, they're out there today where they've replaced their satellites. But so we did have about almost $10 billion of satellite constellations for communications that were sent into orbit. They all went bankrupt. $10 billion was sold in bankruptcy for $125 million. One of the stories about space in the old days, if we want to make a small fortune in space, start with a large one. But this is insane. So we're back at it. We're going to do this again. Now, the real question is what's different? And I think there are some things that are important. Again, this is something there's a lot more detail to go on, but there's some good things that are going on. We have almost $300 billion of investment from, this is equity investment. It's mostly venture capital. The interesting thing, and the thing that's a little troubling to me, is the yellow line here is investment in applications. That's stuff like applications, GPS applications on your phone. It's data applications using geospatial information, all kinds of interesting stuff, but that's where the investment is going. There's much less investment going into infrastructure, the hardware that I talked about. Most of this is going into satellite constellations, which is telecommunications constellations, which, as you may have gathered, I'm not in love with those. So we've had over 400 companies are created. And we've talked about this, the $1 trillion economy. So The other really good thing that's happening is kind of the breadth and depth of the companies coming in. We have two sort of quasi dinosaurs. I mean, these companies, particularly SpaceX, is a Tyrannosaurus Rex. I actually think Blue Origin's got a great future ahead of it. It's just going to plod along a little bit more slowly. But in addition to that, if you look at almost every segment, we've got lots of new companies coming in. SATCOM, Earth observation, space transportation, human spaceflight. We've got private companies coming into the human spaceflight business. And lunar development. It's like any one of these segments we literally have a course on if you're really interested in it as part of the MSO program. Anyway, lots of interesting stuff going on. So this is actually when I do the waves of commercialization, I have waves. And this is the third wave. And if you look at this, the first wave was like no wave. The second wave, we got wiped out. I don't know what's going to happen with this guy. He's either going to have a great ride or he's going to get wiped out. It's kind of one of those waves that's funky and looks like it might just close out on him. We don't know. So here's the good news. We've got $1 trillion space economy, robust, and this is important, institutional development. That's talking about the financial institutions, the amount of human capital that we have in this industry compared to the last time when we got wiped out is remarkably better, and that's good. We got hundreds of firms, billions in investment, robust workforce, really innovative, really interesting business models. What could possibly go wrong? Okay, these are the things to look for. Space is a risky business, particularly if you're in the hardware side of it. And we're already seeing investors leaving. If you pay any attention to some of the SPACs, special purpose acquisition companies, they started out and grew like Virgin Galactic. It went up to about $80 a share. It's now at about $4. So that was a pretty much kind of a wipeout for investors. I talked about this before. I worry about underinvestment in the hardware side of the business, particularly in businesses like geospatial, where the satellites are going to be just commodity data providers. Who's going to invest in those? That worries me. I think the government is going to pick up a lot of slack there. Here is the thing that I think what is the last time we had these waves collapse, it was because of one event. It was either the Challenger explosion, it was the implosion, if you will, of Iridium and Teledesic, really Iridium as a single company. And if we have a major firm or a segment collapse, and I think the segment would be probably the most likely one is going to be small launch, but investors are running as fast as they can from that business. What happens if SpaceX fails? I mean, honestly, there are fragilities in their business model that we could get into, or Blue. That could have a ripple effect. I mean, remember, SpaceX is valued at $150 billion. I actually calculated what they would have to charge if they operated Starlink at capacity, what they would have to charge to generate an intrinsic value, or a real discounted cash flow value of $150 billion. They would have to charge $2,000 a month. And so there's a huge gap between what the real value of the company is and what the market value is. When that gap collapses, if it collapses rapidly, that's not going to be a great place. I'm not saying you shouldn't go to work at SpaceX. You will have a great ride there. But it could be a wild ride. Okay, and then there's finally, what's the stuff that could happen that we don't even know about yet? So, all right, let's get to what you really wanted to talk about, jobs. Okay, so I pulled a bunch of numbers together yesterday. Space employment, 16 to 20, is not bad. It's actually better than most other areas of the economy. It's growing at about 4% a year. That's not bad. It's not the best, but it's not bad at all. Places where you've got more growth are in it's primarily working for the prime contractors, and these are sort of industry calculation, categorizations, guided missile space vehicle propulsion. This is actually launch has high growth, and it's because of SpaceX and Blue Origin and small launchers, I guess. Throw those in there too. So here's an interesting one. I actually went to the Bureau of Labor, the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and started pulling some numbers. So these are annual mean wage. So, oh, actually, I thought that was median. It's mean. Oh, that's a different story. Now that explains it. Okay. So aerospace engineers, the mean wage is $127,000 a year. That's good. It's better than anyone else except airline pilots. I am blown away. The average mean wage is, the annual mean wage is $225,000. I picked the wrong business. Wow. So if you guys if you got a line on being an airline pilot, maybe you just want to stick with that. But space isn't a bad place to be. I did something else too. So if you're interested in looking for jobs in the space industry, particularly with some of the new start companies, there's a Space Capital, which is a great organization itself, but it's an investment fund. They've spun off something called Space Talent, where they're trying to get people together, people looking for jobs together with companies that are offering jobs. They've got over 400 companies in their database. I actually, I pulled some numbers. I expected to see like 75% of the jobs would be engineering. They're not, actually. The majority of them are. But 4,000 jobs in engineering, almost 2,700 jobs are in business development and advanced programs, which is interesting. I mean, to me, if you're in the MSO program, this is probably the best fit for you to get in the front end of the business. And I have to say, well, as a person who spent most of his career in business development, I think it's a great place to be. It's kind of the most exciting part of the business, but good jobs there. Anyway, so now I'm just a couple of words about the MSO if you don't know about it. So what we did in creating this program was we were looking to provide a program that would help people make transitions from aviation into space, transitions from maybe doing test operations into doing program management or something like this, transitions from management positions to leadership positions, where you need to understand the breadth of the industry. You guys all know it's online, but it is integrated, interdisciplinary, comprehensive. First 2 years, we've got more than 875 students enrolled in classes. There are different ways of counting them, but as far as I'm concerned, I like this number because it's the biggest number, but that's the fastest growing program we've had at Embry-Riddle, I am told, forever. I mean, it's pretty good growth. Really excited about what we're doing. And this is the cosmic curmudgeon. That's me. And if it don't make sense, it don't make dollars. So here's the structure of the program. We've got 4 kind of cross-cutting courses that whether it's looking at the markets and the ecosystems, policy and law, program management, what I call industry verticals, where we look at the SATCOM industry, the launch industry, geospatial, human spaceflight. And the idea is for you to understand everything about that industry, but we build from the foundation that you've got to have a business before you have a technology. And you will in these courses for your term project, either design a system, a program, if you will, or evaluate a program. So you are going to dig into technology, probably more than a lot of the other Master of Sciences program, but don't get me started on the whole Master of Science thing. And then we've got 2 space systems courses, which are a little bit outside. They make sort of in space habitation systems and cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is super important. All right, everybody, that's it. That's my story, and I'm sticking to it. And I will return to my desk chair, and I'm happy to take any questions from anyone.
Please feel free to unmute yourself, ask the questions, or if you can't speak, if your chat's not working, if your audio is not working, go ahead and put it in the chat. Dr. Aldrin is here to answer any and all questions from any one of you.
I didn't say any question.
Yes, sir.
If he can answer it, he will. How's that?
Okay, sorry. We had a question?
Yes, sir. Sorry, I didn't know if we were talking or not. I got a quick question about in all those models, have you looked at any of the kind of orbital hardware beyond SATs? Because I've noticed there's been an uptick in talks about orbital fuel depots.
Oh,
Also,
yeah.
some like Varda Space with manufacturing low, early level space manufacturing, and it's becoming real. It's not just talk and weird little experiments on ISS. There's actual money behind it. So I was curious if I don't know if any of that modeling has predicted any future growth in those areas specifically.
Well, so there's yeah, kind of, this is a little bit of I'm trying to figure out what right now we look at those programs, but it's kind of in the context of the broader industry vertical. So for example, if you're talking about tugs and depots, even the sort of stuff that starts debris removal is I put it right now in space transportation. So as part of the launch industry vertical, they all have different dynamics. They are all they're all in the early stages of maturity, and that means a few things. Most often what it means is that a lot of stuff has to happen in order for there to be a mature market. So if we look at for example, depots and in-space transportation, in order for there to be a market there has to be a certain transition in the way we do space operations, where you actually refuel launch vehicles, not to mention satellites and things like that. And that's not a trivial change. And so, I think as you look at those kinds of industries, the early stage of maturity, you have to pay attention to what are the things that need to happen in order to enable that market. And then if you look at also the in-space manufacturing, again, you kind of get into a little bit of the early stage issues of path dependency that I talked about. So for example, one of the things that's really interesting is the idea of manufacturing very large structures in space. So you could imagine at the far end of it, actually space-based solar power systems, which could be 1 kilometer in size. And you can actually do additive. We're developing technologies to do additive manufacturing in space, outside the space station, which is a super interesting technology. But again, you've got to have a space-based solar power industry start to develop. So in a lot of cases, a lot of stuff has to happen. Right now, most of the things, I just read something on Varda. I can't remember what it was in the last day or so. I think a lot of this stuff is really pretty early stage, and we flat out don't know. And so recognize when I look at something, I look at the market. I look at who's going to buy something at what price. And so when somebody talks to me about, there's a company, Space Forge, which is going to do semiconductor manufacturing in space. And so who's going to buy a device that to begin with has to pay $10,000 transportation costs to get it to space and back from space? And can that device that you're going to manufacture in space be competitive with a system that may have less performance and it's manufactured on the ground, but it doesn't have $10,000 a kilogram of transportation costs. And so I start by looking at, can you be profitable in this area, rather than why is there a technology that can do this? And that's not to say you shouldn't look at both, but I got into a discussion with it's actually somebody I'm bringing in as an adjunct faculty, so I had to school her a little bit. Talking about, well, there's all of these firms coming into this market. It must be great. It must be happening. And I said, well, do the fundamentals make any sense? And we kind of got into a discussion, and I think it was less clear to her when we finished the discussion whether the fundamentals for this kind of industry made sense. She was interested in looking at health devices manufactured in space, and there's some crazy stuff that people are talking about that could be cool, like something that really may make sense is fabricating, growing corneas for your eyes in space. The corneas cost a lot of money per kilogram, and maybe the $10,000 isn't a big deal, and arguably you can do much better in microgravity. And so maybe that's a market, but that smells to me like a $500 million market. It's maybe $1 billion, but it's not going to transform space. So my well, how do I say it? I guess it's a caution. My point to all of you is, when you're looking at stuff, understand the fundamentals of the bigger market that it's in. So eyeball corneas are in literally the ophthalmological market or eye surgery. I don't know, but look at that market and understand the dynamics of that market to figure out whether it makes sense. So I'll give you another example. So not just corneas, but they're talking about making livers and all kinds of stuff like that in space. And so no doubt somebody who needs a liver will pay a lot for it. But one of the issues is, and I didn't really look at this, I stumbled across an article talking about how there was real concern in the organ transplant industry over the ability of people to get organs from one location to another in literally, you're talking about 2 hours. Okay, you cannot get from space to a hospital in 2 hours, I think. So, I mean, I don't know, maybe if you manufacture it in space, it magically doesn't perish the way but the point is, you got to understand the whole ecosystem that you're jumping into before you jump into a business based solely on a really cool technology. I know this is—
Yes, sir. Thank you. What I was thinking about or read about anyway was like non-sedimentation kind of technologies like Z-bland, so high-end fiber optics, and then some pharmaceuticals that you could only do in microgravity. And those seemed like bigger markets. Maybe. Yeah, printing livers is cool, but we're not there yet, like you said.
Well, so I mean, the fiber optic thing seems that Made in Space was doing that a few years ago. Wonderful company. I love Made in Space. I think they're doing really cool stuff. And I actually do think that they have a pretty good chance of finding a market, but it's probably going to be manufacturing things, doing external additive manufacturing. But the fiber optic thing was really hot for a while, and doesn't seem like it's gone anywhere. I'm actually right now just building the human spaceflight course, developing that. And so I'm learning about this stuff right now. So Douglas, if you come across interesting stuff, send it to Aldrin at ERAU. Send me stuff. I will read anything.
Yes, sir. Will do. Thank you.
Yeah, I'd love to hear from you. Other stuff? Doesn't anybody want a job?
Are you offering?
Oh, sorry. Sorry. Excuse me, sir. Can you hear me?
I can.
Oh yeah, sure. After watching after listening all the things we have right now, so I really interested into the lunar development business, but I don't yeah, I just know about that, and then we see on the news about NASA gonna send a human back to the moon next year's. Yeah. So what kind of business in the lunar development, and then how the how they're gonna make the money, or how they're gonna make the the, the, the things is can like help is
Yeah.
the thing can affect to the earth, to what the value we get
Yeah.
from the lunar development.
So I'm actually working on a project right now with an organization called Beyond Earth, and it started out that we were going to write a paper on space financing and what needed to happen. And we kind of realized that for lunar development, specifically, it was what's it going to take? How do you finance a economically self-sustaining presence, human presence on the moon? But one of the things we realized was we really need to understand the roadmap, and it's not just a straight line roadmap that we usually do with technology development. We should buy this, buy this, buy this. You don't need a map for that. All you need is a speedometer and a gas gauge. But we're talking about what are the real inflection points between where we are now and a human settlement. So one of the things to get at your question is it's not that hard for me to make sense of this, given certain assumptions. So if there is ice on the moon, and if you can produce propellants, and if, and this whole project was, what are all of those ifs? There is I'll call it a multi-billion-dollar market, but if all of these things happen, a multi-billion-dollar market for lunar propellants. And that's not crazy. And so the question is, what's the pathway, and what are all the points of intersection and things like that? And so it's probably a ways off, but how do I say? I think it's reasonably possible that some of you will have the opportunity to get jobs on the moon and not being an astronaut, literally repairing robots that are doing lunar mining and things like this. I run a foundation where I'm talking to kids a lot younger than you, and I think they will be able to apply for jobs. I had one of them come up to me and say he wants to be a barista on the moon. The moon is an astonishingly cool tourist destination if you can get there. I mean, picture this: you're at the edge of a crater. On one side, it's permanently shadow. So on that side, you have the blackest sky you could imagine, the greatest vision of stars you could possibly imagine. On the other side of the crater, you're looking at the Earth because it has permanent sunlight. There's a handful of these craters on the poles, and you could literally envision a habitat with a bar on each side. And that is an astonishing place to be. And it's probably the coolest place to be for a human in our solar system, right? Because Martians not going to care about looking back at Earth so much, but humans will. And so there are things about the moon that are compelling. It's just going to be kind of a question of, how many right now going to the moon is, even if you had that, it's just the standpoint of transportation, it's hard for me to conceive of a ticket for less than $100 million. And so there's a handful of people you can actually look at the number of people that are worth, let's say, more than $5 billion. And which one of those are actually healthy. And I mean, there are probably a couple of hundred people in the world who could do that, but 10 of them will actually do it. And that's not enough market. But so, I mean, the moon will probably happen. But I think we really need to understand all the things that need to happen between here and there. And sometime this year, we'll have a paper that'll be published somewhere.
I trying to understand your point right now, and then it just like pop up like right away on my mind, because actually we live on Earth, and then we have I'm not sure, because we had limit like the rocket fuel, or we had a limit of oil. So I don't think too much about the entertainment industry at all. And then the thing I think much about is how we can how I can say that, how we can take the, yeah, please give me a moment. Yeah, I'm sorry. Like,
Let me pick up some of these questions here.
yeah,
Uh,
sure.
NASA, Lockheed, SpaceX for me. Boy, that's they're very, very, very different companies. SpaceX is a great ride, but you're going to work really, really hard.
Hey, Mr. Aldrin, I
Yeah.
actually have a question. That's actually me. That was my name's Angel, and I'm actually a student here at Embry-Riddle Worldwide. And now that you
Okay.
mention that, kind of piggyback off what you were kind of discussing not too long ago, in terms of, for me, quite ambitious in terms of the kind of the companies and stuff like that that I'm looking to pursue. I'm fairly young, but I've always had a dream of becoming an astronaut, going to space like you were just mentioning. But do you see any viability in other kind of aspects of that, kind of you were discussing with the moon and other forms of maybe not being an astronaut, but being in that sort of realm, in that sort of space? Do you see any growth in that in the future of maybe not being
Yeah,
an
I do.
astronaut, but something akin to, I don't know, working alongside something like that, or being on those missions, or being on the moon in some sort of aspect that may not be astronaut related, but in a, I guess, in a
Yeah,
synonymous way?
it's an important point, and I really should have addressed this in my talk. The biggest revolution that's happening in space isn't commercialization, it's democratization. And what I mean is, so when my dad went to the moon, there were 3 people who went to the moon, 2 of them walked on the moon, a bunch of people worked on it, and 300 million people watched. That's changed now. We have, our foundation has kids in high school building satellites. We're talking about programs in middle school with kids building satellites. You're going to have the opportunity, if you want to go into space, but going as a NASA astronaut probably isn't. Right now, it's kind of the best path, because you become a NASA astronaut and then you can become a commercial astronaut. But there's going to be pathways to fly into space, and it won't involve necessarily just buying a $50 million. The tickets, $50 million ticket. The tickets will come down, but there will be real jobs in space, mostly doing things to maintain machinery that's going to be operating in space. And so if it's all about going into space, there'll be opportunities. But I think the more important thing is that when you look at space broadly, and I'll focus on the geospatial industry, the real opportunities aren't even building the spacecraft, aren't even operating the spacecraft. It's using the data from the spacecraft, and you're going to have to understand what's going on in space to be able to work with that data. And I think that's a super exciting place to be. And so when you're looking for careers in space, don't just look at the hardware. Don't just look at being an astronaut. There are going to be lots of other opportunities. And, you know, by the time you guys get to be my old age, space is going to be everywhere. And so right now, with the transitions that are going to happen, the opportunities at lower levels, you go to work for a small company, and in 5 years, you could be running the whole business development or engineering organization. Right. If you go to Boeing, give it 20 years, and maybe you'll get out of a cubicle in 20 years.
Just because of that growth.
Well, it's just but you got to decide. And if you have a high risk tolerance, getting into small companies is a great opportunity. But you need to go in understanding that in 6 months or a year you could be bankrupt. And there will be but once you get an opportunity with a company, and let's say over the course of a year or two, you're actually running a team of a few people, and then you go to the next company and all of a sudden you're a manager of 10 or 20 people, and then you're a director. I mean, you can have that kind of career growth if if you're willing to be flexible geographically, all kinds of things like that, there are going to be great opportunities out there. I saw one question that was, how do you transition into getting into space? Take the Master of Space Operations program. I'm not kidding. That it's what it's all about. It's what it's all about. And we will teach you what it all looks like so you can help find your opportunity. When you see your opportunity, you're going to know how to get the job. And you will, I think this gets into more career guidance, but one of the things that's really important for all of you is when you come in, when you finish your bachelor's degree, you will have some expertise in something. And what the Master of Space Operations program does, it gives you a breadth that's kind of crossing the T to understand an industry. But for your first job, you need to focus on whatever that vertical is, whether it's electrical engineering, whether it's finance, whatever it is, what's that sort of vertical support that you've got to get your first job. And then you can move around and you'll know where to move around. But, I think in the world that you're going to grow up in, its mobility is going to be really, really, really important. Other questions? Or should I just?
Yeah, it looks like we have
Yep, go ahead.
a question there from AJTRU. It looks like he says, my concern with that is what will the impact be of using up any ice on or in the moon?
Yeah. So basically you're saying, are we going to use up all the ice on the moon? So we don't really know, but we've got a pretty good idea that they're literally gigatons of ice on the moon. But we got to figure that out. And what we don't know is concentration of the ice. We know that we get reflectivity. We find hydrogen and oxygen in the same place, so that's a good indicator. But we don't know how it's mixed in with the regolith. We don't really know how we're going to extract it. I mean, the idea of you don't send a bulldozer down into 20 degrees Kelvin. I mean, these craters are some of the coldest places in the universe because they never see light. And machinery does not like 20 degrees Kelvin. Remember, at absolute zero, nothing moves. It can't. And so we have a lot of problems to solve to figure this out. But I think, I think there's a lot of ice on the moon. I think there's a real ethical question over extracting resources from the moon. And that's
really what was spinning in my mind when I'm as crazy as I am about this. And I remember reading a little bit I found for a project or a paper I was doing about space law and the kind of history of it. It was a good long brief and really spelled out a lot of where it started from and where it is today. It was really fascinating, and I saved it somewhere. I just geeked out on it so much.
Send me a note. I can tell you all about it.
Right.
It's a tough one. I'm actually on the board of advisors of a thing called For All Moonkind. And in fact, last Friday, I gave a presentation to the United Nations General Assembly on that topic. Ethics is a challenging thing because in an absolute sense, there is almost no ethical way for humanity to survive. If you really want to get pure about it, I mean, is it ethical to kill other animals to eat them? So what you end up looking at is ethics in a sort of relative sense. And until we become sort of sentient beings of pure energy, we need to feed ourselves and we need chemicals and things like that. And it's probably more ethical to get them off of the moon than off of the Earth. But it's the ethics of mining lunar regolith don't trouble me all that much. And there's a long discussion about lunar resources and space law that I'd be delighted to talk to you about, but I think the rest of the people on the line would absolutely go to sleep. But it's and I don't want to punish them much.
Somebody did ask in the chat, just want to make sure we get some of the other questions answered. Do you know of any fellowships or internship programs you would recommend that they look at?
Yeah, I do. So I look at, I don't know exactly the way Boeing and Lockheed are doing it right now, but the big companies have phenomenal internship programs. So let me give you what I think. I don't know if it's the gold standard. It's a great program, ULA. And I think Lockheed, Boeing, probably Blue has a great program now. SpaceX probably doesn't. So what ULA will do is they'll take you after your sophomore year. They will bring you into an internship program, and it's a 3-year program. So the first year you go to one site, the second year you go to another site, the third year you go to another site, and the expectation is that they'll hire you after the third year if you want the job. But it's a great program because it gives you great exposure to the whole company, and it does put your career on a fast track. It's not surprisingly tough to get into. And I don't know how many people they bring in, but Embry-Riddle has a great reputation. So look at big companies and look for multi-year programs, but big companies do a great job with internships. Small companies do not. When I was running Moon Express, we had internship programs, but I would assign people to coach and sort of work with the intern throughout the whole program. And they didn't do it. And it wasn't important to their job. Some would do a good job, but we were making it up as we were going along. So it's a great pathway. But I think about getting in early with one of the big aerospace companies.
They asked, how do they go about enrolling in the space operations course with the MSO? Is that a part of ERAU worldwide?
Yes, it is. And I don't know, just apply. I actually, yeah, I mean, you guys all know Embry-Riddle far better than me. Yeah, there's an application process. I will tell you that anybody's on this call, I would love to have in the program. I would love to. Yeah. And let me say this, aside from the numbers are great. And so we have lots of people in the class. We are building a great team of adjunct faculty, but here's what blows me away is the quality of the work we get out. And I think part of it is because to do things well online, you have to engage with you every single week. And we have to engage with you in online discussions, doing real things, making progress on your term projects. But the work we get out of you is phenomenal. Best work I've seen anywhere. Best work I've seen. And so to me, that is the most important. I mean, the good students do incredible work. They work together pretty well. Unfortunately, one of the things they're working together really well on right now is complaining about something. But they're doing it as a team. And so I really like that. But I'm blown away by the quality of the work, the quality of the students that you're going to get involved with. And I'm working really hard to build great programs for it. I love this.
Somebody had mentioned, sorry, just want to make sure we get all the questions answered. Okay. The MSO program, you mentioned the MSO program is worldwide and asynchronous, but I thought I heard something about part of it happening at Shriver SFB, or is that a ways off in the work still, ?
So, yeah, we've been approved to teach at Shriver, but, and it's actually, I live in the Denver area, so it's not a long drive for me. And I would be delighted to do that, but I don't know that we've really gotten a number of students to do it that way. So right now it's all asynchronous. I would like to do something in the future where we could actually bring students together for a week or two in Florida. I would do it at the visitor complex at the Space Center. But I haven't figured out how to find the time to do that just yet. I think in theory, everyone says, yeah, this is a great idea. And they know it's like, yeah, he'll get to it someday. But I would love to do something like that. But right now the program is completely asynchronous. We're working on a new program that that is much more technically oriented. But we're getting started with the approval cycles on it. But it's a program which is tailored for program managers. And so some of the cross-cutting courses will be similar, but instead of doing industry verticals, what you'll do is you'll actually propose a program to your instructor as a customer, and you'll negotiate requirements with your customer and all this kind of stuff. It'll be very very hands-on and very real world, but it's specifically for people who want to become program managers. So it's kind of a little bit narrower, but a little, not a lot more technical, but enough technical content to it that you really have to have a technical undergraduate degree. But that's on the way. Yeah, we still have to go through all the approvals, but I'm pretty confident this is going to happen. Anyway.
Okay. The last question that's in the chat for you, Dr. Aldrin, it says, I'm in my sophomore year at ERAU. Is there somewhere we can locate this ULA info?
Just go to ULA's website and HR kind of stuff. So it's obviously a good time to be talking about that. I think you better do it quickly, because my guess is, as I recall, January is where they kind of hit this stuff really hard. So just look HR and on their website. I can't really I can't help you any more than that. I don't know that much anymore, but just don't tell them you know me.
Another question came in. It says, my undergrad is project management. Will that hold me back in that program management direction?
No, but I think one of the things we have to, I don't know in the course of project management, how much technical content you've got. And one of the things I think we have to think about is there a way for someone with that? Because it seems like it's a good background to have. But so here's the basic thing that we're teaching you to do. There's one skill, which is how do you do trade-offs? And it's first of all, how do you understand what's the most important thing that you have to decide? Technically, how do you decide that? And then executing the actual technical, economic, and policy trade-offs. And so you need to have the math background, but you've got the program management background, which is helpful. So it seems like, I know there are courses that can get you up to speed on the mathematics and things that you would have to know. And so, I mean, I don't know how we're going to handle that. So I wouldn't rule it out.
Okay.
It seems like it would be a good career path for you. But if you've got time to do some of the intro engineering-y kinds of things, do it. And don't be afraid to send me a note. We can have a conversation about it. And since I don't know, right now, since we're not done with any of this stuff, this is a good time to start asking those questions so that we make sure as we build the program, we're taking that kind of stuff into consideration. I hadn't thought about that particular pathway, but it makes sense. And we ought to figure out a way to make that happen.
Thank you. I'll go ahead and shoot you my case and what I'm excited about, what I'm looking at, and I would appreciate your feedback.
You'll get it.
Thank you, sir.
And if I actually say you'll get it. Amy knows that sometimes I can be challenging.
I'm not saying a word. I'm sitting here quiet.
Don't be afraid to bug me. I respond to cattle prods.
Any other questions for Dr. Aldrin?
All right, everybody. It's been my pleasure. It really has. And I wish you all the luck in the world. If you want to come into space, it's a great place to be. Lots of exciting things going on. And again, don't be afraid to reach out to me. So thank you all for having me. I
Thank you
enjoyed
for your
doing this.
time. We sincerely appreciate it. Thank you so much.
All right, bye-bye.
Thank everybody for their attention today. And this concludes the Career Ready presentation. So I hope you leave here not only with new insights, but with renewed enthusiasm for your future careers. So we look forward to hearing more about your successes. And don't forget that Saturday is the budget meeting. So we encourage everybody to try to be there. It's
not
at
going to the
11 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time. So if you can be there to help the vote and get our budget approved, then we can try to have more events for everybody on the team. So we need the students to actually participate and do the vote. It's your club, it's your fun. So the only way we can do that is with your help. So anybody that can be there on Saturday at 11 a.m., please do so you can have your voice be heard in that vote. Okay. And thank you all for being here. And